they found the skeleton still chained to the bed. That's what the Patterson boy would tell folks for years afterward, his voice dropping to a whisper when he described how the iron links had rusted through the bones, how the skull had fallen sideways on the moldy ticking, how the whole room smelled of death and something worse, the sour stink of a man who died alone, screaming into a gag that had rotted away to nothing. But that discovery wouldn't come until 1794, 14 years after Ezekiel Hardesty first turned the key on his stepdaughters. And by then, the twins were long gone, living under different names in a different territory, still waking in the night with their hearts pounding, still holding hands in the dark and whispering the same question: did we go too far? This is how it started. The mountains held their secrets close in those days, wrapped tight in morning mist and the shadows of ancient hemlocks. In the spring of 1780, when the dogwoods bloomed white as bone against the dark hillsides of southwest Virginia, most folks in the settlements along the Clinch River were too busy surviving to pay mind to their neighbors' business. The Cherokee raids had quieted some after the treaties, but danger still lurked in the hollows, and every family kept to themselves, tending their corn patches and hoping to see another winter. That's why it took so long for anyone to notice what Ezekiel Hardesty had done to his stepdaughters. Sarah and Rebecca Marsh were 17 years old when their mother died of the winter fever in February of that year. They were identical twins, mirror images of each other, with hair black as a crow's wing and eyes the color of creek water over slate. Their mother, Catherine, had been a Cherokee woman who'd married a Scots-Irish trader named Thomas Marsh. When Marsh died of a snakebite 5 years earlier, Catherine had eventually remarried, a mistake that would echo through the years like a rifle shot in a canyon. Ezekiel Hardesty was a large man, thick through the chest and shoulders, with hands like sledgehammers and a face that seemed carved from hickory, all hard planes and sharp angles. He'd come down from Pennsylvania, he said, though he never spoke much of his past. He had a way of filling up a room just by entering it, and his silence was heavier than most men's words. Catherine had married him, thinking her daughters needed a man's protection in that wild country. She died, never knowing the truth of what she'd brought into her home. The twins had always been strange, people said. They moved in uncanny harmony, finishing each other's sentences, waking at the same moment in the night. Old Mrs. Patterson, who lived closest to the Hardesty cabin, said she'd seen them singing together once, and their voices had woven so perfectly that she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Some of the more superstitious folk whispered that such similarities weren't natural, that twins like that had powers that shouldn't be meddled with. But Ezekiel Hardesty wasn't the type to fear superstition. He feared only the judgment of men, and in those mountains there were precious few men whose judgment reached very far. The trouble started 3 weeks after Catherine was buried in the little plot behind the cabin. Sarah had gone to the spring for water at dawn, and when she returned, she found Ezekiel waiting for her on the porch, his face dark with something she couldn't name but recognized in her bones as dangerous. "Your ma's gone," he said without preamble. "This is my house now. My rules." Sarah set down the water bucket carefully. "We understand that, sir. Rebecca and I aim to earn our keep. We can—" "You'll do what I say when I say it," he interrupted. His eyes moved over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Both of you. You're not children anymore, and this ain't a charity house. Rebecca appeared in the doorway behind him, silent as smoke. The twins locked eyes over Ezekiel's shoulder, and something passed between them, an understanding, a warning. That night, Ezekiel barred their bedroom door from the outside. Just to keep you safe, he said, through the thick oak planks. Lots of dangers in these mountains at night. Wild animals, Indians. A man's got to protect what's his. The twins said nothing. They sat on their shared bed in the darkness, holding hands, listening to Ezekiel's heavy footsteps cross the main room, listening to the scrape of his chair on the floor, the clink of his whiskey bottle against the table. Sarah, Rebecca whispered. I know, Sarah whispered back. They didn't sleep that night. They lay awake planning, their minds working in that mysterious tandem that had always set them apart. When dawn came grey and cold through their single window, they heard Ezekiel unbolt the door. He brought them a plate of cold cornbread and a cup of water. You'll stay in this room until I say otherwise, he told them. You've been ungrateful, disrespectful. Your ma would be ashamed. Our mother, Rebecca began, but Sarah squeezed her hand, silencing her. Ezekiel's face darkened. Your ma's dead. I'm all you got now, and I say you need to learn some obedience before you're fit to walk around free. He left, and they heard the bolt slide home again. Then came a new sound, the ring of hammer on metal. For 3 days, Ezekiel worked at something outside their door. The twins could hear him sawing, hammering, swearing. They tried to peer through the crack beneath the door, but could see nothing except the play of candlelight and shadow. On the 4th day, when Ezekiel finally opened the door again, they understood what he'd built. The door now had an iron frame bolted into the log walls. With a lock so heavy and complex, it might have secured a bank vault. Iron bars crossed the inside of the door, like the ribs of some mechanical beast. The single window in their room, which had been large enough to climb through, now bore iron bars as well, set so deep into the logs that no amount of prying could loosen them. There, Ezekiel said, satisfaction thick in his voice. Now you'll stay put until you learn to be grateful for what I provide. You can't keep us locked up like animals, Sarah said, her voice shaking with rage. Ezekiel backhanded her across the face. She fell hard, tasting blood. Rebecca cried out and rushed to her sister, helping her up, their bodies forming a protective unit, as they'd done since they were children. I can do whatever I want, Ezekiel said quietly. This is my land, my house. You're my responsibility. The law gives me the right. And ain't nobody gonna come asking about you. Your ma had no family left, and your pa's people are scattered to the winds. Far as anyone knows, you ran off, or got took by Indians. These mountains are full of graves nobody knows about. He left them then, locking the reinforced door behind him. They heard him walk away whistling. That was in March of 1780. By the time the dogwoods bloomed in May, the twins had been locked in that room for 2 months. Ezekiel brought them food once a day, cornmeal mush, dried venison, water. He'd cut a small slot at the bottom of the door to pass the plates through. He never spoke to them anymore. Sometimes they heard him moving about the cabin, heard him receive visitors on the porch, heard him laugh and talk as though he were a normal man living a normal life. Once, Old Mrs. Patterson came by, asking after the girls. "Gone to stay with kin in North Carolina," Ezekiel told her. Catherine's cousin offered to take them in, said it wasn't proper. Young girls living alone with a man not their blood. "That's mighty sudden," Mrs. Patterson said, doubt in her voice. "Life's sudden in these mountains," Ezekiel replied. "Here today, gone tomorrow. Ain't that the truth?" Mrs. Patterson went away, but she wasn't satisfied. She told her husband something wasn't right about Ezekiel Hardesty, had never been right. But her husband said it wasn't their business, and anyway, the twins had always been peculiar. Running off wouldn't be unlike them. Inside their prison, Sarah and Rebecca endured. The room was perhaps 12 feet by 12 feet, with the single barred window facing east. They had their bed, a chamber pot, and nothing else. No books, no needlework, no means of occupying themselves. The days stretched like pulled taffy, endless and formless. But the twins had something Ezekiel didn't understand. They had each other, and they had patience, and they had a bond that went deeper than blood or bone. While other prisoners might have gone mad with isolation, the twins found strength in their mirrored existence. They talked for hours, remembering every detail of their lives before the prison, keeping their memories sharp and bright. They exercised, pacing the small room in unison, keeping their bodies strong. They sang the songs their mother had taught them, Cherokee lullabies that seemed to make the very walls of their prison resonate with old power. And they planned. "He'll slip eventually," Sarah would say. "Everyone does," Rebecca would agree. "We just have to be ready." We will be. Their conversations often ran like this, one voice picking up where the other left off, thoughts flowing between them like water finding its level. The seasons turned. Summer brought heat that made their small room stifling, the air thick enough to chew. Autumn brought blessed coolness, and then winter came howling down from the high peaks, turning their prison into an icebox. Ezekiel never gave them blankets beyond the single thin coverlet on their bed. The twins slept curled together for warmth, breathing the same air, dreaming the same dreams of freedom and vengeance. Mrs. Patterson came by one more time that first winter. They heard her voice, heard her asking again about the girls. Had a letter from them, Ezekiel lied smoothly. They're doing well in North Carolina, got themselves courted by a pair of brothers, might be married come spring. "Awful strange they wouldn't write to me," Mrs. Patterson said. "I was close with their ma." "Young girls," Ezekiel said, "got their heads full of romance and such. You know how it is." After that, people stopped asking. The twins became a memory, then less than a memory. The war with Britain was raging in the east, and the frontier settlements had their own troubles. A few missing girls, even identical twins, weren't worth much notice when men were dying by the hundreds, and the whole world seemed to be coming apart. Time moved differently for the twins. Without the normal markers of days, work, social interaction, the rhythm of household duties, they lost track of months. They marked the passing seasons by the angle of sunlight through their barred window, by the temperature, by the sounds of birds and insects outside. Spring peepers meant another year had passed. The first frost meant another winter coming. Ezekiel developed a routine. He brought them food once a day, always at noon when the sun was high. He'd slide the plate under the door, take away the previous day's plate and empty chamber pot, and leave without a word. Once a month, he'd open the door and stand there watching them while he cleaned the room, sweeping out the corners, checking the bars on the window. He'd say nothing during these inspections, just look at them with those flat, dark eyes, daring them to try something. They never did. They stood perfectly still, hands clasped together, faces blank as river stones. They'd learned that any reaction only pleased him, and they wouldn't give him that satisfaction. But oh, how they hated him. That hatred became a living thing, coiled in their bellies like a snake. It kept them warm in winter, gave them strength when hunger gnawed at them. They fed it and nurtured it, whispering to each other in the dark all the ways they might make him suffer. Poison, Sarah would suggest. Too quick, Rebecca would counter. We want him to know it's us, Sarah agreed. We want him to feel it, Rebecca added, every moment of it. Just as we have felt this. Their bodies changed over the years of captivity. Their muscles grew lean and hard from constant pacing. Their hair grew long, past their waists, wild and unkempt. Their skin, once brown from the sun, grew pale as milk except for the small rectangle of their window, where they'd take turns standing in the thin shaft of sunlight that penetrated their cell. Their eyes, always penetrating, took on a feral quality, like a hawk's eyes or a wolf's. They discovered they could speak without words. Perhaps they'd always been able to do this, but in the enforced silence and proximity of their prison, the ability sharpened to a fine point. A glance could convey complex thoughts. A touch could transfer emotions. They developed a language of tiny gestures, invisible to anyone watching, that allowed them to communicate in complete secrecy. This would prove useful. In the third year of their captivity, they thought it was 1783, but couldn't be certain. Something changed. Ezekiel took sick. They could hear him coughing in the night, a deep, rattling sound that went on for weeks. His visits became irregular. Sometimes he'd forget to bring food for 2 days, then bring double portions as if that made up for it. His hands shook when he passed the plates through the slot. He's dying, Rebecca whispered. Not fast enough, Sarah replied. But the sickness passed, and Ezekiel recovered, meaner than before. He cut their portions, gave them water that tasted of rust and worse things. Winter that year was brutal, and he let their fire go out, leaving them to shiver in the dark while he kept himself warm in the main cabin. We should have let the sickness take him, Sarah said, through chattering teeth. How? Rebecca asked. We're in here, and he's out there. Next time. Next time. The fourth year brought a visitor they hadn't expected. One afternoon in late summer, they heard voices, Ezekiel's and another man's, younger, uncertain. I'm looking to purchase some land hereabouts, the stranger said. Heard you might be willing to sell. Might be, Ezekiel replied. Depends on the price. Could I see the cabin, get a sense of the property? The twins froze. This was new. Ezekiel never let anyone inside. Cabin's nothing special, Ezekiel said quickly. Just the one room and a loft. Got a stable out back. Good well, 20 acres cleared. Still, I'd like to see. No. Ezekiel's voice turned hard. Property's fine, but the cabin stays private. Man's home is his castle, as they say. The stranger left, confused, but not suspicious enough to press the matter. The twins listened to him ride away and felt their hope ride with him. We're never getting out, Rebecca said. It was the first time either of them had spoken the phone. The toe thought aloud. Don't, Sarah said fiercely. Don't say that. Don't even think it. It's been 4 years, Sarah. 4 years. We're 21 years old, and we've spent 4 years in this room. We'll die here. He'll keep us here until we die, and then he'll bury us in the woods, and no one will ever know we existed. Sarah grabbed her sister's face between her hands, forcing Rebecca to meet her eyes. In the dim light, they looked like mirror images of desperation. Listen to me, Sarah said. We will get out. We will make him pay. I swear it on Ma's grave. I swear it on the bones of our father. We will survive, and we will have our revenge. Do you understand? We will. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. How can you be so sure? Because I have to be. Because if I'm not, then he wins, and I will not let that man win. They held each other then, rocking slightly, drawing strength from each other, as they'd done since before they were born, 2 hearts beating in rhythm, 2 minds thinking as one. Together, Rebecca whispered. Always, Sarah whispered back. The years continued to pass. 5 years, 6, 7. They were 24 years old and had spent 7 years locked in a single room. Their youth was gone, stolen by Ezekiel Hardesty, and locked away, like they were locked away. But they endured. They survived. They kept their hatred burning bright, and their hope burning brighter. And then, in the 8th year, Ezekiel made his first real mistake. It happened on a Tuesday in October. They thought it was October anyway, by the smell of wood smoke and the particular slant of light through their window. Ezekiel had been drinking. They could hear him in the main room, talking to himself, his words slurred and angry. He was ranting about something. Taxes, the government, neighbors who'd wronged him. The twins had learned to ignore these episodes. Drunk Ezekiel was unpredictable, sometimes forgetting to bring food, sometimes standing at their door and shouting accusations about their ingratitude. This night was different. They heard a crash, the table overturning perhaps, or a chair being thrown, then heavy footsteps approaching their door. The bolt scraped back, and the door swung open. Ezekiel stood there swaying, a candle in one hand, a whiskey bottle in the other. His face was flushed, his eyes unfocused. "You think you're so clever," he slurred. "Both of you, always whispering, always plotting. I hear you in here. I know what you're planning." The twins said nothing. They stood side by side, ready for whatever came next. "But you'll never leave?" Ezekiel continued. "You hear me? Never. This is where you'll die. This is where you'll rot. And nobody will ever know you were here." He took a long pull from the bottle, whiskey spilling down his chin. "Your Ma," he said, and his voice took on a mocking tone. Catherine, she thought she was so fine, with her Cherokee blood and her proud ways. Thought she was too good for a man like me. Well, I showed her, and I've shown you. Sarah felt Rebecca tense beside her. Their mother was sacred ground, not to be defiled by this man's drunken mouth. "Don't," Sarah breathed, squeezing her sister's hand. But Ezekiel wasn't done. She cried, you know, at the end, cried and begged, said she was sorry for ever marrying me, sorry for bringing daughters into the world, sorry for... Rebecca moved. After 8 years of perfect stillness, perfect obedience, she moved like lightning. She lunged at Ezekiel, fingers curved into claws, aiming for his eyes. Sarah moved with her, the two of them acting as one, years of rage finally unleashed. But drunk as he was, Ezekiel was still strong and still quick. He dropped the bottle and caught Rebecca by the throat, slamming her against the wall. Sarah leapt onto his back, trying to claw at his face, but he shook her off like a dog shaking water. His fist caught her in the stomach, driving the air from her lungs. She collapsed, gasping. Rebecca kicked and fought, but Ezekiel's grip on her throat was iron. Her face turned red, then purple. Sarah tried to rise, tried to help, but her body wouldn't obey. Through dimming vision, she saw Ezekiel's face, saw the satisfaction there. Then he released Rebecca, letting her drop to the floor, choking and gasping. He stood over them both, breathing hard. "Thought you could take me?" he panted. "8 years locked up, and you thought you could take me." He laughed, a terrible sound. "I should kill you both right now, snap your necks like chickens." He raised his boot over Sarah's head. This was it, she thought. This was how it ended. But then he lowered his foot, shook his head. No, that'd be too easy. You want to die? You'll have to wait. You'll have to wait and suffer, just like I planned." He backed out of the room, still laughing. The door slammed shut. The bolts scraped home. In the darkness, the twins lay on the floor, battered and defeated. Rebecca's throat was bruised, and she could barely swallow. Sarah's ribs ached where his fist had connected. They crawled to each other, held each other, and for the first time in 8 years, they wept. But the attack had done something Ezekiel hadn't anticipated. It had given them information. They'd felt his strength, yes, but they'd also felt something else. A tremor in his hands, a catch in his breathing. He was aging. 8 years had passed for him too, and he was in his 50s now, slowing down, weakening. "Did you feel it?" Sarah whispered when she could speak again. Rebecca nodded, understanding immediately. "He's not what he was. Next time we'll be ready. And there will be a next time. Yes, he can't resist forever. His pride won't let him." They were right. A week later, drunk again, Ezekiel opened the door. But this time the twins didn't attack. They lay on their bed, apparently sleeping, apparently helpless. Ezekiel stood in the doorway, watching them, waiting for them to acknowledge him. When they didn't, he stepped into the room. That's when Sarah's eyes opened. She'd been watching him through slitted lids, gauging the distance. 3 steps into the room. The door still open behind him. He was between them and freedom, but he was also off balance, swaying slightly. "Now," Sarah said. They moved together, perfectly synchronized. Sarah went low, throwing herself at his legs. Rebecca went high, leaping from the bed to strike at his face. Ezekiel, caught between them, toppled backward. His head struck the edge of the open door with a sickening crack. He went down hard, and the twins were on him instantly. Sarah grabbed the whiskey bottle he'd dropped, always with the bottle, always drinking himself stupid, and raised it high. 1 blow to the head would do it. 1 blow and 8 years of suffering would be avenged. But Rebecca caught her arm. "Wait. What? Why?" "Look at him." Ezekiel lay sprawled on the floor, blood trickling from a cut on his scalp. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow, but he was alive. "We should kill him now," Sarah hissed, "while we have the chance." "No," Rebecca said, "not like this. Too quick, too easy." Sarah understood immediately. They were thinking the same thing, as they always did. Death was too good for Ezekiel Hardesty. Death would be a mercy. They wanted something else, something better. "The door's open," Sarah said. "We could run." "Where? We don't even know what year it is. We don't know who's still alive, who we could trust." And he'd hunt us. Yes, he'd never stop hunting us. They stood over his unconscious body, two thin figures in ragged dresses, their hair wild, their eyes bright with an idea that was forming between them, passing back and forth in that mysterious way twins have. "We lock him in," Sarah said slowly, "like he locked us. Let him feel what we felt. Let him rot like he meant for us to rot. But he's bigger, stronger when he wakes up. We won't be here. We'll run, get help, tell people what he did." "No," Rebecca's voice was firm. "No one will believe us. We've been gone 8 years. We're nobodies. Crazy girls who ran off. He'll talk his way out of it." Sarah felt her heart sink because she knew her sister was right. Who would believe their story? Who would take their word against a property-owning white man? They were the mixed-blood daughters of a dead Cherokee woman and a dead trader. They had no stand-in, no credibility. "Then what?" she asked. Rebecca smiled then, and it was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of something that had been broken and remade into something harder and sharper. "We do to him what he did to us, but worse. We lock him away where no one will ever find him, where he'll be completely forgotten, and we make sure he knows he'll die there, alone and afraid, just like he wanted us to die." Sarah felt her own smile forming, mirror to her sister's. Yes, but first they had to secure him, and for that they needed materials they didn't have. Rope, chains, something to bind him before he woke. They moved quickly, frantically searching the main cabin. It was strange being in this space after so many years. The table was still overturned from Ezekiel's earlier rage. A fire burned low in the hearth. Everything was exactly as they remembered and completely alien. They found rope in a corner, probably meant for hanging meat. They found chains in the stable. Ezekiel had kept a mule at some point, though it was gone now. Working together with practiced efficiency, they dragged Ezekiel's unconscious body back into their prison cell. It felt right, somehow. Poetic. They chained him to the bed frame, using every length of chain they could find, wrapping him so thoroughly that he looked like a caterpillar in a cocoon. They gagged him with torn cloth, and then they waited for him to wake. Dawn came slowly, painting their prison cell in shades of gray and gold. Ezekiel stirred, groaned, then jerked fully awake as he realized his situation. His eyes went wide. He thrashed against the chains, but the twins had done their work well. He was bound tight, unable to do more than writhe. "Good morning," Sarah said pleasantly. Ezekiel's eyes found her, and in them the twins saw something they'd never seen before. Fear. 8 years, Rebecca said, standing beside her sister. 8 years you kept us in this room. Do you remember what you told us? That we'd die here, that we'd rot here. Ezekiel made muffled sounds behind the gag. "We're not going to kill you," Sarah continued. "That would be too kind, too quick. You wanted us to suffer slowly, to lose our minds in isolation, to be forgotten by the world. That's exactly what's going to happen to you." They'd spent the night talking, planning. The cabin was isolated. That was part of why Ezekiel had chosen it. The nearest neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was a mile away. Other settlers were even farther. Ezekiel had made himself unpopular over the years, had a reputation for wanting to be left alone. People obliged him. "We're going to leave," Rebecca said. "We're going to walk out that door and start new lives. We'll go far from here, somewhere no one knows us. We'll change our names, change our story. And you'll stay here, in this room, chained to this bed." Ezekiel thrashed harder, making desperate sounds. "No one will come looking for you," Sarah said. "You made sure of that. You drove everyone away. You made yourself so unpleasant that your neighbors will assume you've just moved on, or maybe died in the woods somewhere. People disappear in these mountains all the time. You said so yourself." "We'll leave you water," Rebecca added, "and food, a little food, enough to keep you alive for a while, not forever, but a while. Long enough to think about what you did, long enough to go mad with it." They set about making their preparations. They brought him a bucket of water, placed it just within reach. They left him a sack of cornmeal and dried apples, enough for perhaps 2 weeks if he rationed carefully. They emptied his chamber pot and left it for his use. Then they stood at the door, looking back at him one last time. "The bars on the window will keep you from escaping that way," Sarah said. "The lock on the door is your own design. You made sure it couldn't be picked or forced. The walls are solid log, 3 feet thick in places. You built the perfect prison, Ezekiel. You just never imagined you'd be the one inside it." "Someone will come eventually," Rebecca added. "Months from now, maybe. A year, 2 years. They'll find this cabin and wonder what happened to the man who lived here. They'll find this locked room, and they'll break down the door, and they'll find whatever's left of you. A skeleton in chains. And they'll wonder what kind of monster lived here. They'll never know it was you. They'll never know the truth." Ezekiel was weeping now, tears running down his face into the gag. "Goodbye, stepfather," Sarah said. "May you rot slowly," Rebecca added. They closed the door. The bolts slid home with a sound they'd heard 1,000 times but never made themselves. It was deeply satisfying. In the main cabin, they found Ezekiel's strongbox. It held $30 in continental currency and some silver coins, his life savings. They took it all. They found spare clothes, too large but serviceable. They took food, blankets, anything useful. At dawn, they walked away from the cabin. Neither looked back. The world had changed in 8 years. Or perhaps it was they who had changed, and the world was the same as it had always been. They walked south, avoiding roads, keeping to game trails and creek beds. They had no plan beyond distance, putting as many miles as possible between themselves and the cabin before anyone discovered what they'd done. Not that they felt guilty. Guilt required remorse, and they felt none. What they'd done to Ezekiel was justice, pure and simple, an eye for an eye, except they'd been merciful. They'd given him food and water. They'd given him a chance, however slim, at survival, more than he'd ever given them. On the 3rd day, they came upon a settlement they didn't recognize, a cluster of cabins near a river ford. They'd traveled farther than they thought. People stared at them as they approached. These 2 strange, identical women with wild hair and wilder eyes, dressed in men's clothes too large for their frames. An old woman approached them, concern on her weathered face. "You girls all right? You look like you've been through something." The twins looked at each other, a conversation passing between them in silence. What story to tell? The truth was too complicated, too unbelievable. They needed something simpler. "We were captured by raiders," Sarah said, the lie forming smooth and easy. "Cherokee raiders. They held us for years. We finally escaped. It was the right story for the time and place. The frontier was full of captivity narratives, tales of settlers taken by Indians and held for months or years. Some of it was true, much of it exaggerated, all of it believed. The old woman clucked sympathetically. "You poor dears, come, come. You need food, rest. My name's Martha Gibbons. This is my son's homestead. We'll see you taken care of." They were given food, real food, more than they'd seen in years. They ate slowly, carefully, their stomachs unaccustomed to plenty. They were given clean clothes, a place to sleep. The settlement's people were kind, curious, but not invasive. Captivity stories were common enough that two more didn't cause much stir. "Where's your family?" Martha asked. "Where were you taken from?" "North Carolina," Rebecca said, picking a place at random. "Our family was killed in the raid. We have no one left." "Your names?" The twins exchanged another glance. They couldn't use their real names. Too risky, too traceable. "I'm Ruth," Sarah said. "And I'm Naomi," Rebecca added. Biblical names, common enough not to raise questions, significant enough to please the pious settlers. They stayed in the settlement for 2 weeks, regaining their strength, listening to news of the wider world. The war with Britain was over, had been over for years. The United States was a real country now, not just a revolutionary dream. George Washington had been president and stepped down, and now John Adams held the office. It was 1789. They'd been locked up for 9 years, not 8 as they'd thought. 9 years stolen from their lives. They learned other things too. The Cherokee had been pushed farther west, their lands seized in treaty after treaty. The frontier was filling up with settlers, new cabins going up every season. The world was moving on without them, had moved on without them, and they were ghosts trying to find their place in it. "What'll you do?" Martha asked them one evening as they sat by her fire. "Head west," Ruth, who was Sarah, said. "Make a new start." "West is hard country," Martha warned. "No place for women alone." "We've survived harder," Naomi, who was Rebecca, replied. And so they moved on, always west, always moving. They worked when they could, doing laundry, cooking, any task that would earn them food and shelter. They never stayed anywhere long. They were restless, haunted by what they'd left behind in that cabin. At night, they'd lie awake and wonder, was Ezekiel still alive? Had he managed to free himself? Had someone found him? The not knowing ate at them. They'd meant to forget, to move on, to build new lives. But revenge was a chain that bound them as surely as they'd bound him. 5 years passed. The twins, Ruth and Naomi, to the world, but always Sarah and Rebecca to each other, had made a life of sorts in Kentucky. They'd saved money, bought a small plot of land, built a cabin. They lived quietly, keeping to themselves, trusting no one. People thought them odd, twin women living alone, but odd wasn't unusual on the frontier. Everyone had their story, their secrets. But the cabin in Virginia haunted them. In dreams, they'd see Ezekiel's face, hear his muffled screams. Had he died quickly of thirst or hunger, or had he lingered, going mad with isolation as they'd intended? The not knowing became unbearable. "We have to go back," Sarah said one spring morning in 1794. Rebecca knew immediately what she meant. "Yes." "We have to know. We have to see." They made preparations quietly, efficiently. They told their few neighbors they were visiting family, would be gone a month or 2. They packed supplies, took their savings. The journey east felt like moving backward through time, each mile stripping away the life they'd built, revealing the trauma beneath. The country around the old cabin had changed. More settlers, more cleared land. The Patterson place was still there. But old Mrs. Patterson was gone. Died, too.